And when you realize that a lot of healthcare professional, highly trained healthcare professional are spending time on tasks that we can do today with robotics and automation, you see this really big opportunity where in 10 years, right, I'd love to see more robotics and automation in healthcare, right?
Yeah. Nicholas, coffee, tea, or something else? What fuels your mornings? It's such a great time question, but we'll talk about that in a second.
Yeah, always coffee.
The reason that's so funny is as we hit record the first time, I just spilt my coffee all over my keyboard and desk and everything. So that was, yeah, very well timed. Um, when you were a kid, what did you think you'd be when you grow up?
Oh man, I I don't know. When I was really little, I'm not sure. Obviously, you go through all the different phases when you're a child. Like I'm gonna be a firefighter, or policeman, or I'm gonna be a professional athlete. Eventually, you kind of become a little more realistic in your expectations. I think around high school, I started to settle in. I really like engineering. I
Yeah.
really, especially mechanical, right? I like to work on something physical. So, funny enough, right? I'm the director of software engineering, but software wasn't always where I started out. I did mechanical engineering, um, and because I wanted to work on real physical pieces of hardware.
Yeah.
But of course, now I do so much more software of the hardware than I do the actual hardware.
Interesting. Was it classes that got you into it in high school or like a hobby? Or how did you find it?
No, I think it was just natural curiosity,
Mm,
just, seeing cars and seeing, I grew up in a really rural area, seeing tractors and equipment, a lot of
mm,
machinery, um, and just being curious about all that heavy equipment, right? How does it work? Um, and then from there, right, it became a little bit more detailed. Once you go to college, you have more access to things. You really get to learn more about what you like and refine what you like. I feel like as a kid, I didn't have a lot of really good opportunities in my high school, especially within robotics and engineering. We didn't have STEM classes, but that's also
yeah.
part of the reason why when I was doing graduate school, the big thing for me was actually volunteering and contributing to all these different programs in the Pittsburgh area that coaching first robotics teams, first Lego League teams, because to me it's like,
Nice.
wow, if I had that when I was a kid, right, that's what I would have done, right?
Cats
That
followed
that's
you.
the team I would have been on. That's the program I would have worked with. And I think it would have given me a big head start, to prep for mechanical engineering major in college. But
Yeah.
they have all those resources now. They didn't have them back when I was a kid.
They're such great programs, such great organizations. Um, what's one technology that you can't live without?
I don't know. I mean, you got to say phone, right? Everybody has to have the phone, and especially with the fact that smartphones are so good now. I mean, they
Yeah.
are your computer in your pocket, and so um, I don't want to say I love to always be connected, but I mean, you do always have to be connected. And then,
Yeah.
having kids as well, right? You get a phone, you make sure it's got a good camera. So you're gonna go and you're gonna take a lot of really good pictures, and so your
Hmm.
life is so phone centered, which I feel terrible about now. And I try not to set a bad example for my kids, where I've always got the phone out, but
Sad
they're
reality. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Work is always happening. You're always connected, or your kids are doing something and you got your phone out because you're like, I got to be ready to take a picture, right? I gotta
Yeah.
video
Yeah.
this. And you don't want to miss it, but it definitely models to them that you can't live without that phone, right?
Yeah. It's an interesting one because, I've asked that question to a lot of people, and phone is probably the top answer. There's some others that come up, but when I think about it, and I saw like a visual that compared what it was like, I think like in the 90s, early 90s to now, and it had laid out on a table, it had your computer, like a big camera, a video
Mm.
camera, calculator, an alarm clock, like all of these things. And then
Yep.
now it's just your one device. So you couldn't imagine that something like that was going to happen, right? And then now we're so dependent on it. But yeah, I mean, it's a positive in a lot of ways, but you're also just super dependent.
Yeah,
I don't know.
for sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
I didn't want to give I'm sure it's the same answer that everybody gives, but I really it's all of those things in one, right?
it is. Yeah, it's not just calling people or whatever. There's so many things, but yeah, it's true. It's true. Um, Last one, if you could fast forward 10 years and see one impact that your work's made on the world, what would you want that to be?
Uh, the thing that I really love about being at Omnicell is them trying to drive forward this vision of the autonomous pharmacy. And it's something that I didn't really think a whole lot about until I started at Omnicell. And, you know, there's a whole white paper about the autonomous pharmacy vision and really just kind of understanding exactly what that means, right? Where within the world of the autonomous pharmacy, healthcare professionals are spending all of their time with their patients, right? Doing the thing that they were trained to do. Instead of, you have pharmacists nowadays who spend their days in the basement, counting out pills, right? Managing inventory, essentially, right? Every
Yeah,
hospital runs a little tiny warehouse inside where they have to solve this logistics problem of getting all the medications to all of the patients in the entire hospital. And when you think about the scale of that, especially there are some very large hospitals, and you think about how complicated it is because every unit in a hospital is different. Every patient has different needs. It's a hard problem to solve. And when you realize that a lot of healthcare professionals, highly trained healthcare professionals, are spending time on tasks that we can do today with robotics and automation, you see this really big opportunity where in 10 years, right, I'd love to see more robotics and automation in healthcare, right?
yeah,
There's a big shortage of healthcare employees, uh, not enough people to take care of everyone. And the more we can take away those tasks that really is not something that they should be doing, right?
so
If,
true.
you go and you get an MD, or you're getting you're going to be a pharmacist and you're spending all those years in college and all that money. Uh, you don't want to be doing all this manual labor around making sure that medications get from the central pharmacy down in the basement up to every single unit in a hospital. Right.
Yeah,
That's not what you went to school for, but that's how you're spending so much of your day. And so, if we can use technology to really unload that physical labor that they have to do around medication management, as well as that mental load that they have to deal with to make sure that they are meeting all the needs of their patients, it's not going to get done in 10 years, but that's that's something that I would like to see, at least in the position that I'm in.
love that. Love that. Well, look, welcome to Machine Minds, everyone. I'm your host, Greg Terusian, founder of Samson Rose, your robotics talent search partner. And on today's episode, I'm joined by Nicholas Kirsch, Director of Software Engineering at Omnicell. Thanks for being on the show, Nicholas.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Greg. Really excited to be here.
My pleasure. So let's jump into the meat of the show. So, giving the background of you, because you've had this strong career path in the robotics industry, you mentioned you're in Pittsburgh as well. Um, and then you had the mechanical side that you touched on, like that was your first interest. But what really drew you into software and systems engineering?
Yeah, I think how I ended up in software is, we talked about wanting to be working on physical systems, mechanical systems, and then finding my way to mechanical engineering. And then, I had some really great professors at the University of Pittsburgh that were teaching control systems and dynamics. I found that really interesting. And so I ended up going and doing my master's and then my PhD with a focus in control systems. And so it's really mathematically heavy. But
Yeah,
if you're doing a master's, a research master's, or a PhD, where the goal is to do these experiments, publish a paper with the results of those experiments, eventually you have to take all that heavy math and you have to implement it somehow, right? And so, uh, you know, long ago, before computers, control systems were all done mechanically, right? They
Mm,
would have flywheel systems were there to regulate velocity, right? Um, that's not the case anymore, right?
yeah.
Nobody is implementing physical or even large electrical control systems anymore. So now it's just all done with software. And so really you're taking all this math and eventually you have to write all this software and then connect it up to all that hardware. And that's kind of where I started getting into the software side of things. And so I never took a software course, a computer science course ever.
Really?
Yeah, and I did a bachelor's, master's, and PhD, so I had plenty of
Yeah.
time to do it. All of
That's
my
surprising.
courses, yeah, I took some that were a part of the electrical engineering department, but other than that, everything was within the mechanical engineering department, and they'll do things like it's kind of a 101 to programming course where they're just kind of going through programming languages and some really basic things,
Yeah.
but I'm not going to count that because that's very different from anybody who has actually done a computer science, software engineering degree, right? Very different. And so I kind of had to be self-taught and learn how to write code and then learn how to actually write good code. I found out on my first job, it's not that uncommon though to have people come from a mechanical engineering background and end up doing software.
Yeah.
I think when I was at IM Robotics, I want to say most of our team in the early days, most of our team was mechanical engineers writing software, which is pros and cons, right? Definitely not. You don't have that good solid background of a computer science education, but at the same time, you have a better understanding of the physical system that you're trying to write the software to control. And so, because you understand the physical system better, you, it's easier for you to think about how your software is going to interact with all of those
Yeah.
physical mechanical systems.
That's interesting. Yeah, I didn't think about that. That's a good point. So quickly on that, you mentioned I am robotics as well. Can you walk us through your career prior to joining Omnicell?
Yeah, so 2016, I finished my PhD at Pitt, and then I went on and started a little startup called I Am Robotics. So that was my first job after my PhD. I was the eighth person hired at the company. At the time, they were in a small garage just north of Pittsburgh, about 15, 20 minutes north of Pittsburgh. And, startup culture, I love startup culture. I think I'm so glad I had the opportunity to work at I'm Robotics. You get to learn so much when you're at a startup because you have to do so many different things, right? There is not a whole department in your organization dedicated to doing a certain function, right?
Yeah.
There's no HR department or talent acquisition department that's going to help you bring on new people when you decide you want to grow. You don't have a sales department, a marketing department, so it's the engineers that are going to the trade shows and setting up the demos and all those different things. And so, getting to start at a company in a garage, really small, and then be with them through Series A all the way up to, I think we got around 100 employees. We had moved into a pretty large warehouse out in Lawrenceville, which in Pittsburgh is referred to as Robotics Row. So that's where the majority of the robotics companies are located out in Pittsburgh. And it was such a good experience to be a part of an early stage company through Series A and growing. And so, I think the things that we were working on there were definitely ahead of their time, right? We were one of the first companies that were working on mobile manipulation platforms, doing piece picking in warehouses. So, working on those logistics problems of how can I automate the process of picking products in a warehouse. Eventually, the company did pivot and decided to just focus on autonomous mobile robots, and then rebranded to Onward Robotics. And so they're still around. It's just that the mission and the direction is a little different.
Yeah.
Um, so then I think after then, I was at I'm Robotics for 6 years, and sort of got that. that itch of wanting to see other places, get different experiences. And at the time, somebody that I had worked with at IM Robotics that previously left ended up at RE Squared Robotics. And it was around that time that they just happened to reach out to me and said, "Hey, I've got this opportunity. I think you'd be great for it. Let's just talk about it." Right. So they pulled me in with
Famous last words.
yeah, let's just have a conversation.
Let's
And
have a chat.
yeah, it doesn't have to go anywhere. And so
Yeah.
we had a conversation, and so I interviewed with them. I like that they are, RE Squared was very culture first. That was their focus, really protective of the culture. The CEO and founder, Jorgen Pedersen, he would interview everyone, right? That was a part of the process, was for him to speak with everyone, prior to making that offer. And so, they preserved and had a really good culture there in the company. And I was there for 1 month, and then they were acquired by Sarcos Robotics. And so
Oh, wow.
they um, they couldn't tell me. So they
Yeah.
legally couldn't tell me that they were in the process of an acquisition. Uh, they felt really bad about it. They felt like they deceived me. I told them, "Don't worry. That's what I was looking to get, right? I wanted to get more experience, more exposure, see different things, And so we went from being at RE Squared, which I think was around 150 people, getting acquired by Sarcos, which also had 150 people. They were based out in Salt Lake City. To now here's a 300-person company with 20 different projects that we're working on. And so both companies were working on similar projects. They were very project focused companies. So doing a lot of work with the Department of Defense, some contracts with the Department of Energy, uh, but both companies wanted to go from just doing all these kind of one-off projects to being a product company. And so they were looking at all these projects and trying to figure out, which one of these do we think that we have an opportunity to take and commercialize? And there were a lot of different things that the company was working on at that time. So we had underwater robotics, we had commercial airline baggage handling robots, we had exoskeletons.
Yeah.
Um,
I remember.
yeah, yeah,
Mm.
you and I have talked about it, and there were a lot of different projects that they were working on, and so um, it was really hard for them, I think, to make a decision on what to go with.
Right.
Eventually, they just kind of reached that point where they burned through too much money and they had to make the hard decision to let go of the majority of the company. So they inevitably, I mentioned 20 projects, right? There were about 20 projects ongoing, and they had to eventually make a hard decision of, well, let's just pick one, give it really long runway, and so they went with AI brains for robots, right? So sort of your
Mhm.
no code or low code systems where you can train it on a task in a relatively short period of time. And now you go from traditional industrial automation where it's somebody with a teach pendant connected to a robot arm, and they're teaching all the different points to get it to do one really constrained thing again and again and again, to I can just, through natural language, tell it what I want, or through demonstration, tell it what I want, and it will learn it and it will perform that task for me. So that's what they decided to stick with. They renamed and became Paladin AI, so they rebranded, which, again, I always make the joke. That's how you know you're working in the tech industry, right? Is that you have been at a lot of companies that are still around, but not the same name, that have been
Same
through
name. Yeah.
multiple iterations, right? And so my
Pivots,
career,
rebrands. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, and then you've got all the swag that goes with it, right?
Yeah.
So
I
every
love it. Yeah.
every
I was looking.
rebrand, it's a new T-shirt.
Uh-huh. It's so fun. Yeah. Looking back through them and people are like, why do you keep these? I'm like, it's
Yeah,
history. It's
yeah.
nostalgic, right? You look back
So
at it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So within my 9-year career, after my PhD within robotics, I have to tell people that I was at IM Robotics, but that's now Onward Robotics, and I left there to go to RE Squared Robotics, but they were acquired by Sarcos Robotics, which eventually rebranded and became Paladin AI, and now I'm at
Yeah.
Omnicell. Um, and
So
it
what,
sounds like a lot, but it wasn't.
it wasn't.
I'm
Yeah.
not job hopping or anything, right?
Especially a month and then an acquisition. That's pretty wild.
Yep.
Um, what made you decide to move into the healthcare technology space?
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of opportunity, right? That I saw the position that was available. Uh, at the time, like I mentioned, Sarcos Robotics they were shutting down Pittsburgh, so I was looking for whatever I could, whatever opportunities I could in the area. And I mentioned this earlier, that whole idea of the autonomous pharmacy, just saw so much opportunity that within the framework of the autonomous pharmacy, a lot like self-driving cars, they have different levels. They go level
Yeah,
1 to 5, right? And so um, 5 would be the full autonomous pharmacy. One is no automation, nothing. And I looked at this white paper, read it, and really saw a ton of opportunity, right? That I think that most hospitals today are ones and twos, right?
really.
Very, very minimal automation that is used in healthcare. And so I just see so much opportunity for Omnicell to just become that company that is within every single hospital. You don't always see them the same way that you don't see Amazon's robotics and automation, right?
Right.
But when
Yeah.
you get a package, there's a good chance that a robot touched that package, right? I mean, that was a big thing that we did at IM Robotics. When we had our first deployment in Rochester, one of the things that we did was we would put notes in some of the bins, right? Hey, your product was picked by a robot.
I like that.
Um, and that's the thing that you don't always think about. And I think even within healthcare, you're not going to think about that, right? Is
No.
that somewhere down in the basement of the hospital there is like I said, a small warehouse where there's robots that are picking medications for you, so that they can actually make their way up to the unit. You've got autonomous mobile robot companies, AGV companies that are working on the problem of how do you transport medications through the hospital. You've got some people, like Diligent Robotics, that they're working on mobile manipulation platforms that can do a little bit of that medication transport, but can also, when you get to the location where you need to drop off the medications, you can do that all autonomously. So
Yeah.
the technology is starting to get there, but like I said, there's still so much opportunity, and it's a good mission as well, right? The idea of
Of course.
I can help people have better healthcare indirectly, right? No one will ever see it, no one will ever appreciate it, but I'll know the role that it plays, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I say that to people all the time. Like, when you're in the industry and you just speak to someone that's not, and they're like, oh, when do you think robots are actually going to be around and all that? I was like, chances are things in your house
Mhm.
have been touched by a robot when they come to you, like fulfillment centers, stuff like that. Now, medicine, there's so much that goes on behind the scenes. It's just like not front line, or it's not in your home, or you don't see them on
Yeah.
the streets, but it's happening every day. So is this the main product, the main thing you've been focusing on since you've been there in this role, right?
Yeah, so the
Yeah.
focus of at least Omnicell here in Pittsburgh is robotics and automation, and so um, like my own work history, robotics and automation of Omnicell here in Pittsburgh also has a complicated history. So because it actually started 30 years ago. So
Okay.
a CMU graduate 30 years ago built the first medication picking robot, right? And so that
Wow.
was the beginning of it. Which you think about it is, that was a long time ago. That was pretty early on. And so that company was Automated Healthcare, which was acquired by McKesson, divested, became Ascent, which was then almost 10 years ago acquired by Omnicell. So
Mm,
there's been a long history of autonomous pharmacy robots here in Pittsburgh. For a while, they even had one of the original automated healthcare robots in the Science Center down in Pittsburgh. And so,
that's cool.
that was a thing that when I went to Omnicell, when I was interviewing with them, and I went and I saw some of their older products that they had, they keep around. I recognized that automated healthcare robot. And I said, "Oh, I've seen that before. Like, going down to the science center, I've seen it around before." And so uh, it's always, it's been there for a while, right? And like
Yeah.
you said, when will robots begin to impact your life? They already are, right?
Yeah.
30 years there has been robots picking medications in hospitals, right? So they're a big part. They've always been a big part of manufacturing, and logistics has gotten very big. I always tell people about being at IM Robotics and going to ProMat and Modex and watching how those logistics trade shows have changed over the few years that I went to them. Like it was such a big change, right? Logistics just used to be it's conveyor belts and really big shelves and racks, right, and forklifts. That was logistics. You go
Mm,
to ProMat and Modex today, it's all robotics. It's robotics everywhere, right?
yeah.
I mean, once the big industrial robot manufacturers start showing up at trade shows like ProMat and Modex, the more name brand people like Boston Dynamics, right? They got into logistics automation as well. You really saw this change of technology and logistics, and I think healthcare is one of those places where it's what ProMat and Modex looked like, uh, you know, 10, 15 years ago. And then in a
Yeah.
couple of years, you're going to see a lot of different applications of robotics and automation. Not just surgical robots, but a lot of different applications of robotics in healthcare, and you're going to start to see them more and more actually in the hospital, right? Real deployed systems.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very true. Obviously, Omnicell have been doing this for a long time, and like you just mentioned, some deep history in the space. From your perspective, what differentiates their approach to automation healthcare compared to other players in the industry?
Mm. Well, I think one thing that is actually new to Omnicell is the Innovation Lab. So Omnicell just created a new office down in Austin, Texas, and the focus of this office is to do new innovations, right? And so
Nice.
uh, they've recognized that there's a big opportunity in healthcare, and a big opportunity to take all of this technology and apply it to solve problems in healthcare. And the innovation lab is that kind of step in the right direction, right? Wanting to be more innovative in the space, wanting to try new things, to experiment, not just sitting back and being in that position of the innovator's dilemma where it's you're a big company, you've been around for 30 years. I'm making money off of this product. Why would I do anything different, right?
Yeah.
Why change? I can just sit here and keep making money. But I mean, we've seen it, and I think everybody recognizes it now that if you don't keep moving forward, if you don't keep innovating, eventually someone is going to come in and disrupt your space, right? And
True.
so you've got to be willing to disrupt yourself before somebody else does. And like I said, there's so much opportunity that's where I think that the innovation lab is taking advantage of this opportunity and taking advantage of, uh, Omnicell is in all these hospitals around the world. And so
Mm.
we have access to the data to the data to the customers. Tons of opportunity for the company to release new products and to innovate within the healthcare industry.
Like that. How do you balance the complexity of integrating advanced automation with the obviously critical need for reliability in healthcare?
But I think that's one of the hardest problems, and I think a lot of people don't understand that because you watch a video of a robot doing a task, and especially with all the humanoid robots, right? Now we're seeing a new video every week where a robot is doing some new incredible thing, right? Whether it's
Hmm.
Boston Dynamics with their robots doing parkour, or Tesla's robots going and driving cars and being bartenders, right? All these different tasks that they, in theory, can do, right? Um, and that's true. They can do it, but can they do it to a really high level of reliability? And I think there's some industries and some places where you don't necessarily need high level of reliability, where it's okay to be at 97, 98%. But when you're in healthcare, that's not acceptable. And so when a patient needs a medication and they go to an Omnicell cabinet to get that medication, they need to get it right.
Yeah.
High level of reliability, because in the situation where they don't have that medication, where they can't access that medication, uh, that is going to severely affect, some person's health outcome. And so, really critical, high reliability. Another product from Omnicell is their IVX station, which is a robotic system that is actually compounding IV solutions. And so it's taking IV
Wow,
bags and syringes and vials, and it's using a six-axis arm to actually compound an IV bag. And so
that's cool.
now robots are making your medications, right? And so
Yeah,
high reliability is really important, right? There,
yeah, you
there's
can't mess that up.
yeah,
Yeah,
there's no room for error, and I mean,
yeah,
but it's also an instance where robotics and automation makes a lot of sense because it's very easy for humans to make errors, right? And so when they're measuring out medications and drawing it in a syringe from a vial, they're looking at the marks on the syringe, and that's how they're measuring it visibly, right? And so there's lots of opportunities for them to make errors. And when you're doing it with robotics and automation, you can do it with really high levels of consistency. We incorporate gravimetrics so that we can take more accurate measurements of the medications that we're putting into the
yeah,
IV bags. It's a big IoT device, which of course means that you're collecting all this data and you're creating a record of the work that was done. So you know what you put into a bag because at the end they get labeled and they have barcodes, so you can go back and you can see the work that was done in producing that IV solution. So it's one of those areas of it's a really good opportunity to apply robotics and automation, but it has to be done with a high level of reliability because there's such a severe outcome when you make a mistake.
yeah,
So I
yeah. That's
think
true.
yeah, I think that reliability is important to make sure that the patient's safety is guaranteed, but also when these systems go down, right? These people working in pharmacies, these healthcare professionals, I mean, they're doing this all day, 24 hours a day, right? It's a lot like logistics, right? Where logistics is also running 24-hour operations, and so downtime cannot be tolerated, right?
Yeah, I didn't think
Five
about that.
five
Yeah,
5 minutes is a big deal, right? When you're moving products through very quickly, and so yeah, reliability is also really tied to a return on investment. So if the system goes down for a couple of minutes, that is severely going to impact something like your pick rate or the rate at which you
yeah.
produce these IV bags, which impacts the return on investment that you're giving to a customer. So it's important for patient safety, but also for the business case.
Would you say that reliability is one of the biggest technical challenges in healthcare automation today?
I would say so. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
it's the biggest problem you always encounter. I think it's such a big problem mostly because it's so underestimated because it's kind of the 80-20 rule, right? Where the last 20% of a thing is actually 80% of the work, right?
yeah,
And so you get to that first product, you get to that first article, that first demonstration. People see it work and they say, okay, great, ship it, right? And it takes a lot of time and effort to test something to actually measure its reliability, right? How well is this going to run through 24 hours? How well is it going to run through 1 month, right? How frequently are you going to encounter these errors and have to have some manual intervention to fix them?
yeah,
And so the difference between I know that it works because I saw it work and it just works all the time without any issues, right? That's so much more work than just making the first one.
yeah, yeah. Very true. Can you walk us through some of the most exciting software systems or projects that you and your team have been working on? Anything that you can share, that is.
Uh, I think that's the problem, right? I
That's the
can't
problem.
talk
Yeah.
I can't talk about the really cool and exciting stuff. I mean, I think the IVX station is a really exciting product. The XR2 is a really exciting product. So the XR2 is it's a six-axis arm on a linear rail that actually is picking medications, and so when it's using barcode reading and using computer vision to do optical character recognition and read off expiration dates. And so, one of the biggest wastes of money in a hospital is just wasted medication
Really?
because I mean
Because of
you have
expiration?
to, yeah, so because you have to have, right, you need to have medications on hand, and you don't
Yeah.
always know what you're going to need because patients
Right.
have different needs, patients move through the hospital, right? So the patients that are in the hospital are changing every day, so the demand for what you need is changing constantly, but you also can't be in a situation where you don't have a medication on hand. So you always make sure that you have a large enough inventory. Um, but
Interesting.
obviously, some of it's going to get expired, right?
Yeah.
Or even in a situation where if there's a recall, a medication recall, and so now you have to go through and every medication that is from a certain lot number, you have to pull every single one out of the hospital. So for some hospitals, that takes months to do
Wow.
because you, again, in the vision of the autonomous pharmacy, the perfect autonomous pharmacy, you would have total transparency in where your medications are at all times, right? So
Right.
visibility into everything. And like I said, we're not at that level, right? So inventory is not accurate everywhere. You don't know where everything is. You don't know where all those lot numbers went. And so what happens is you have to go to every location in the hospital that you have medications stored, go through all of those medications stored in that location, find every single lot number and pull it out, right? And so
Wow.
with the XR2, right, that's part of the value proposition is it knows what those medications are. It knows their expiration dates. It
Yeah.
knows the lot numbers of those medications. And so when there's a recall, yeah, it's just going to dump all the medications that it has inside from that lot number.
Yeah.
Or it'll do things like when it dispenses a medication, it'll dispense medications that are closest to their expiration date. So that way you're doing first in, first out. So whatever medication you got in first to your pharmacy, that's the one that you're sending out to patients first. So it's helping
Yeah.
reduce waste in the hospital. And so, like I said, it's
It's awesome.
yeah, all these different aspects where robotics and automation can have such a big impact in healthcare.
Yeah. I love those like sometimes unforeseen or unplanned for benefits because when you talk about inputting some of these solutions with a end user, maybe if you're not in the healthcare system, you don't work in a hospital or whatever, and you're producing this like automation system, you think, hey, this is just going to make things smooth, seamless, and you don't need a pharmacist down there. And then, well, actually, it reduces waste. Actually, it does all of this stuff in real time. We know where everything is. It's like, wow, there's so many other levels, benefits that something like this can produce. And then it becomes a no brainer
Right.
to implement it.
Exactly.
Let's shift gears a bit because you lead this software engineering team at a company operating in very regulated and mission critical industry, right? When you're looking at hiring, what qualities do you look for when building the teams and or bringing people on?
Man. I mean, I feel like that's, to me, it's a personal question, right? I think everyone has their own personal preferences and what they look for. I mean, I think what I always look for is, I'll start with culture fit. I feel like I can teach people these skills in terms of technology, right? Software development, robotics. I can teach these skills pretty easily, right? I've gotten good at it. In fact, part of the reason I went and I did a PhD was because I thought I was going to go back into academia and teach. And so
Oh, really?
I
I didn't
feel
know
like
that.
those technical skills I can teach. The
Yeah.
soft skills are so much harder to teach. Um, and in some ways, I don't want to change who a person is, right? I've got no intention of doing that. Everybody can be their own person, and that's totally fine. But you want to have people that are going to be a good fit on your team, people that are going to get along, that are going to work together, that complement each other's skills and abilities. And so, for me, I'll focus a lot on the soft skills. I'll focus a lot on the culture fit. Obviously, you've got to have some background in technical skills because um, you don't want to have a long time to ramp a person up. But
Yeah.
if I find somebody who has that continuous learner mentality, that I see as, not just currently a strong technical ability, but someone who is curious and it's going to continue to grow and to develop. To me, I look at that as, well, I'll invest time in you. Even if you don't meet my requirements today, I will invest time in you because I'm going to see that growth over time. And you are going to be such a a high impact employee, in a year or 2 years in comparison to somebody who comes in with a very static mindset of,
Mm,
this is what I do. I'm very good at it. I don't need to change it. Right.
yeah.
Um, you hire people that are going to grow, that are going to continue to develop, and eventually they'll overcome those other people, the more static, fixed mindset
Yeah.
people.
I
Um,
like that.
so that's like I said, that's my approach. And I think it's hard, especially we have so many different skills that we need on our teams. It's hard to say exactly technical wise what do we look for, but the soft skill stuff. I mean, that's going to apply to any role, right?
I think that's key. Whenever I do an intake with a client, I always focus a lot on that section because, the must haves, nice to haves, and all that on the technical experiences. If you're just looking for that, sure, you'll be able to find a lot of things. But if you're looking at, continuous learning, culture fit, maybe someone who's demonstrated a great trajectory before and new challenges, and then they're going to come in something brand new, especially if it's super innovative or it's something that no one's done before, right? How do you assess for that without having some sort of openness to upskilling and learning, right? So yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, and I think even just sometimes you'll have companies that'll use degrees as a barrier to entry to a position, right? And I
Yeah,
totally disagree with that. I mean, I've seen people without college degrees that are better software developers, better engineers than people that have gone through actual engineering programs, right? And so sometimes people get really focused on these are the check boxes, and if you don't check this box, you don't get to move past this point in the interview. um,
yeah,
I think people that are so caught up in that and can't like make a real assessment of an individual and what their skills are, right? Look past the degrees that you think they have to have. I
right.
think people miss a lot of really good, strong candidates.
It's very interesting that you would say that, and kind of refreshing, being someone who's gone all the way through and got their PhD, because usually I see the other side. There's hiring managers that haven't, and then they're like, I know firsthand there's great people out there that don't have the traditional path or have, been self-taught or whatever it is, or might have a degree in like music or arts and then have gone into engineering, right?
Yeah. That they
But
just they get into it and they become really passionate about it, and I mean they just take off, right? And that's really amazing to see, that people, and like I said, that is somebody who's going to be really high impact because they don't need structure to learn something.
yeah,
They're capable of going out and being curious and doing it on their own. I think that's a really tough thing when you're hiring recent college graduates, that the big transition that they have to make is from being in a college course where there's a question and there's an answer
yeah,
to coming out into industry where there is a question, there's a problem, and no one has the answer, right?
right,
Or there's more than one answer, and which one's the better one. And so now it's really testing your critical thinking skills and your ability to step into a completely open-ended problem, right?
yeah,
And learn totally independent, of having a structure and having a book that somewhere in that book is the answer, right? That's just, it's not always the case. It's not real.
so true. What advice would you give to engineers interested in transitioning from like hands-on technical role into something more leadership focused in their career?
Yeah. Oh, man, I think and it's not for everyone. I think that there's a lot of people that think that the only way that you can move up in your career is through a leadership role. And I don't think that's necessarily the case anymore. I think it definitely used to be, but now I see a lot more opportunities for people to grow in their roles, just as an individual contributor working on the technology.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, if you want to be a leader or a manager, again, this goes back to all those soft skills, which again, when you went through your engineering program, there was probably not a course that you took on soft skills, right? How to manage people. That's not
So
a
true.
thing, right?
Yeah.
And it's really unfortunate that they don't have that. And I think one of the other things that I participate in I think about 6 years now, I've been a part of the University of Pittsburgh's alumni and residence program, which tries to fill that need a little bit of this is your academic program where you're learning these technical skills. But it's really important that you talk to some of these other alumni that are going to give you advice on like what are you missing, right? What's the missing piece in your education that is
Yeah.
going to make that transition from being in academia to being a professional working in an industry that's going to make that really hard for you. And so, soft skills is a big one, right? That if you want to be a manager, you've never taken a course on it, it's really hard to step into that role because when you apply to management level positions, what they're going to ask you is, have you had experience managing people before? Right.
Yeah.
So it's the constant chicken and egg problem with moving forward in your career. Show me that you've done it before I let you do it.
Yeah.
And so I think usually there's a lot of opportunities that you can find within the organization, times that you can step up and say, yes, I'm an individual contributor, but I'd like to guide some of this development and work with some of the younger engineers, the newer engineers. Maybe it's managing interns, right? Maybe your company has an internship program. Just saying, yeah, I'll step up and I'll manage that intern and finding ways that even though it's not your job function to manage those people, but finding ways that you can demonstrate that you're capable of doing it in your current position. And so sometimes you have to get a little bit creative at how you find that, but
Yeah.
usually the opportunities are there. So
Love that. Yeah, I tell people the same thing. You have to kind of, in your current role, in your current company where you're a known entity and you've already built up like good faith and shown your abilities, that's a great way of trying to move into a new role or level up.
I
Because there's,
think, pick up a book as well, right?
yeah,
So pick up a book, listen to some management podcasts, right? Harvard Business Review,
mm,
um, Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, right?
yeah,
Surrounded by Idiots was a good one. I don't know if you've read that one. The title's a
oh,
little
nice.
bit, it's a little bit misleading in the title, but essentially, the title comes from a story that this person had where the author was trying to help a company who was struggling. I forget the industry. I think they were maybe manufacturing. And so this manager was really struggling with managing his employees, right? And so he was getting really frustrated, and he said to this person, "Well, how can I ever get things done? How are things ever going to get better? I'm surrounded by idiots, right?" And obviously, the author then kind of replies to him, "Well, I mean, who hired these idiots, right?" And
Gotta
so
take some accountability.
yeah, that's the story to the title of the book. But what it really focuses on is just it's kind of it's dumbed down psychology. And so my wife has a doctorate in psychology, so it her and I have talked about this a lot. It is dumbed down psychology that makes it a little more accessible to people like you and me that don't have a doctorate in psychology, and it's really showing you how you can identify different people based on their behaviors and how you can better work with those individuals, better manage those individuals, take advantage of um, people's strengths and their weaknesses, right? And figuring out how do you put people into opportunities where they can be successful, right? So it really is a how do you better manage people book, but
Yeah.
the name sounds a little off putting.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I really like that. I'll have to find that one. I was actually going to ask you what advice you have, like books, podcasts, or resources, and So I'm glad that you jumped onto that.
Yeah.
Well, look, I'm
The
conscious of
Victory
time.
Minds podcast is a great resource if you're not listening,
You're saying that you are the first person that I met out in the wild at a conference that mentioned, "Hey, I listened to the podcast. I think it's awesome, and I get so much from it." And I was like, "Wow, this is real." This was like very early on, and it meant so much to me. So I'm glad that you shared that, and
Yeah.
I'm glad we could finally get you on the show as well.
Yeah. And then we bonded in the most Bostonian way that you possibly can, right? With a beer and lobster rolls, right?
What else do you do?
Yeah. But now
Uh,
I mean, yeah, podcasts are such a great way. I mean, it can be tough to identify ones that are good for you, but that's where I think, right, you go out, you experiment, you listen to new things. If you like it, great. If you don't like it, that's fine, move on, right? But I mean, so many people are producing podcasts now that you're going to find something that fits that need that you're trying to grow in some way in your career, and that information is out there, and there are people that are trying to help and guide, and you just have to
exactly.
find it. You've got to find your people, find your group that are going to enable you to improve yourself.
Love that. I love that. Before we wrap, I wanted to ask what excites you about the future of software-driven automation in medicine and healthcare, and what you're looking forward to in the coming years.
And I mean, I think AI is definitely causing such a big acceleration in everything. Um, I, I don't know. It's exciting and then also not exciting because you see a lot of people chasing these AI applications that are making sense, that there's return on investment. And then you see people chasing these other applications where it doesn't really work, right? That they're not really focused on solving the problem. They just think I have this tool and I need to use it. So, AI is getting thrown around absolutely everywhere, right? And
Yeah.
I mean, it is great because you can do things so much faster than you used to be able to do. And there's so much investment going into it now that industry itself is booming, right? And so, I mean, when we're very focused on robotics and automation, so for us, it's more about that physical AI, right? How do we perform all these different tasks with robots so that we can automate it and get the healthcare professionals, people back to spending time with their patients? How do we do that? How do we enable that? And so, Chat GPT doesn't do that task, but because there is so much investment into, these large language models that it's making the technology better for robotics as well, right?
Yeah.
So NVIDIA is developing all these great systems because everyone now has their own LLMs, or there are so many different AI-enabled apps, and so NVIDIA has this really big boom, right? But then you see what they're doing with their technology, where they're building these new systems that are really focused on real physical robotics, right? So intelligence, but physical intelligence. And so, um, other than humanoids, I think it doesn't get a whole lot of focus. But even with the boom in investments in humanoids, I mean that's gonna bleed out into other industries. And um, other than general physical intelligence, there's a lot of ways you can take that technology, simpler applications that you can apply it to, where it's going to work at a really high level of reliability, where you're going to be able to do this task, right, and train something to do it very quickly. And
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be I want a humanoid robot that does everything around my house. It's I just want a robot that can pick and move these pieces here, right? Simpler applications. But you're taking that really high level physical intelligence that could be used to do really complex tasks, finding those simpler applications where you can work and you can do it at high levels of reliability. I think that in the technology industry is exciting. But again, like your phone, like your piece of technology that you can't live without question, I feel like I'm just answering the same way that probably everybody else has before. So I think it's
No.
it's it's good to caution people though that, right, AI is exciting, but just remember it's a tool, not the solution to everything.
Yeah. I love that. Well, I think that's a great place to end. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Nicholas. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
thank you for having me.
My pleasure. How can our listeners learn more about you and stay in touch and also find out about what Omnicell's doing?
Oh yeah, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so you can definitely find me on LinkedIn. I'm not the only Nicholas Kirsch on LinkedIn, so make sure you get the one at Omnicell. Um,
We'll put it in the show notes for sure.
yeah. So I think that's a great way to get in touch with me.
Let's keep in touch. I'll speak to you soon. And thanks again.
Yeah, thank you.